The following program is a UWTV classic.
From the University of Washington in Seattle, Upon Reflection.
Hello and welcome to Upon Reflection. I'm Marcia Alvar. In the Arab world, novelist, playwright, and scholar Nawal El Saadawi is one of Egypt's best-known dissidents and a leader in the struggle for women's rights. She's also a physician who served as Egypt's Ministry of Health director until she was fired and later sent to prison by Anwar Sadat. El Saadawi continues to push for what she calls the unveiling of the mind, despite the banning of her books and death threats from Islamic fundamentalists. Currently, she's a visiting professor at the University of Washington, where she teaches the politics of Arab feminism. And welcome to Upon Reflection. I read that you grew up in a small village in Egypt where it was not unusual for girls to marry by the time they were 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Why did your life take such a different turn?
Well, that's a very, very big question, because I myself don't know very well. You know, it's something that happens in your life. You don't plan it, though at a very deep level, maybe the unconscious, there is a sort of planning and a sort of will that works even against your will, that you want to change your life and you are dissatisfied with what's happening to little girls, and especially girls from poor families in the village. So in a way, I was born with this feeling that there is something wrong in being a girl, in being poor. And I have to fight against that, because I felt that there was a lot of discrimination against me and my brother, for instance, because I had brothers and sisters.
Many.
Yes. And I felt I was much better in school than him, much more intelligent, much more hardworking in the school and in the house. I used to help my mother, and he was not good at school, and he played in the street, etc. And then I was rewarded by my hard work in the holidays, especially the summer holiday, by staying at home and working and cooking. And he was rewarded by his failure in school by playing.
Excessive injustice at a very early age.
Yeah.
You said you were also, there was an effect from your mother and your grandmother. You said the dreams that they had that were unfulfilled.
Oh yes, dreams play a very important role. And my mother, I was lucky in fact to have my mother, because my mother was very, very ambitious when she was a little girl. But her father, you know, my mother came from a different background than my father. She came from a rather middle-class family in Cairo. She went to a French school. And then her father brought her out of school when she was 14 or 15 and married her off to my father, because he thought my father now is though he came from the village, his family are poor, but still through education, he had more or less a good job in the
Potential.
Yes, potential, and good job in the Ministry of Education. But my mother was crying on her wedding night because she loved school. She wanted to be, she used to tell me, I wanted to be in the airplane and to see all the world. I wanted to invent something. I wanted to play the piano, you know, and her ambition was aborted. So in a way, through her ambition, which was aborted, I started to have my own ambitions and my own dreams.
What drives the expectations, or maybe more properly put, the lack of expectations for women in your country? Is it a religion? Is it politics, economics?
It's like here in the United States. In fact, I am here in the United States, and I don't find a lot of differences between the way girls and women are brought up here in Egypt. It is all, everything. It is being a woman. It is a class problem. If you belong to a poor family, it is politics, the patriarchal system, it is religion, Christianity or Islam or Judaism. You know, women are oppressed in all religions. So in a way, I feel that even I was more lucky to be born in a village in Egypt than if I was born here. I'll give you an example, for instance. I went to the medical college. I graduated from high school in 49, and then I went to the medical college. At that time here in the United States, if I was in the United States, I could have never been accepted in the medical college. But in Egypt, just because I had the good grades, the best grades, I went to the college. There was no discrimination. There was no quota for women or black people as here.
When you point that out to your students, does it surprise them? Your students here in America?
When I teach them?
Yes.
Surprising, why?
When they may have some assumption that somehow you would be so much worse off having come from this rural village, from a poor background, that somehow the opportunity is so much greater here.
Ah, yes. You mean the students here? Well, my students here in the university, they already read my novels and my books, because my books and novels are taught in many universities here. So in a way, what I felt that they don't look to me as a woman that came from Egypt or the village. They look to me as a novelist, as a writer. So it seemed that they have forgotten about that.
You have two extraordinary professions, and some might say a right brain, left brain set of professions, being a physician, being a writer. How did those two, did they develop in tandem? Which came first? And how do they relate to each other?
Well, I didn't find any conflict between my scientific education and artistic tendencies and love, because this separation between what we call science and art is false. It's exactly like the separation between body and mind and spirit. There is nothing. There is no separation whatsoever between the body, the mind, the spirit. It's one. And also medicine, science, economic, politics, history, religion are inseparable from art, writing, photography. You know, it's all. And that's how I look to creativity. In fact, creativity brings all these fragmented areas together. And one of the weak points in education generally, not only in our region, even here in the United States, this fragmentation of knowledge that they separate in school, in colleges, between what they call science and art, or between medicine and politics, or health and politics, or literature. So in a way, my life, my experience in life, and also feminism, in fact, because the more I understand why women were oppressed, the more I understand about feminism in our region, the more I know that we are a whole, and we should look to knowledge as a whole, not as fragmented areas.
You use the word feminism, and I know in one interview you said you consider feminism to be a very British word, that in the Arabic language there is no word for feminism. And it made me wonder if it's just a small linguistic difference, or if it's symbolic of something larger, a larger gap between the dreams and the aspirations of women in the Western world and women in the Arab world.
Of course, the Arabic language is totally different from the English. We don't have the word feminism, but we have other words that exactly have the same meaning, like women liberation, tahrir al-mar'a. It's the same, but it is different, you know, because it's two different languages. So in a way, feminism to us, or women liberation to us in Arabic, is much more broader, in fact. We are much more politicized. We do not separate between liberation of our bodies, liberation of women, and liberation of our countries, because we were colonized, and we are still colonized somehow, economically. So we cannot be liberated as half the society, as women, without liberating our land, our economy, our politics, our history, our religion. So it's a whole. So feminism in my region accommodate international politics, colonialism, neocolonialism, class, patriarchy, a criticism of religions, rereading of history, in order to understand how women, for instance, in ancient Egypt, were very, very strong. I was inspired when I read about ancient Egypt by our female goddess Isis and our female goddess Nut and Nun. They were very, very, very progressive women, symbolizing the intellect.
So you see women's liberation as a number of issues linked together. And so you see Western feminism looking more through a telescope at a smaller focus?
Not all of them, in fact, to be fair, because I have a lot of women here who are my friends, and they are they have a very broad vision, and they understand about international politics and colonialism. But most of the feminists here, they are limited in a way. They separate between sexual oppression and political. They pay much more attention to what they call sexual abuse, etc. The family, they look to that. And they do not have this broader view of how women living in Somalia or in Egypt, why we had the Gulf War, why there was a Somalia war. They don't know anything about that.
You founded the first Pan-Arab Women's Association. When women from all the different countries of the Arab region came together, did you find more common bonds, or are there barriers between the countries in the Arab world that make it difficult or challenging for women to get together?
Of course, there are many similarities and many differences. I'll give you some examples. For instance, in Saudi Arabia, women status is very, very backward relative to Egypt. They cannot drive cars, they have to be veiled. The system is very oppressive under the so-called Islam. So the Islam, how Saudi Arabia understands Islam is totally different how in Egypt they understand Islam, or in Yemen, or in Tunisia, or in Algeria, or in Libya, or in Morocco. It's a world of differences. But usually when some people ask me, what's your country? I say the Arabic language. The Arabic language brings Arab women together. The history, the future, bring them together politically. There are many things in common. Culture, also the Islamic culture, Islamic civilization, and the Christian civilization also, because we have Copts and Christians in our region. Jewish civilization also, we had Jewish people in Egypt, etc. But politically, we have also a lot of similarities, because we were colonized by the French, by the British, now by the international Western hegemony, mainly the Americans, etc. So in a way, all these things bring us together. But as I told you, there are a lot of differences. But I found no difficulty whatsoever. In our association, we had members from different Arab countries, and we speak the same language. Especially when we are, when we are what we call feminist, when we have this analysis of patriarchy and class.
In addition to your careers as a writer and as a doctor, you also worked in government in Egypt. You were director of the Ministry of Health. Why were you fired from that job?
Well, I was dismissed from my work in 1972. I was Director General in the Ministry of Health. I was in charge of health education in the whole of Egypt. And I started in the late 60s to found the Health Education Association and to issue a magazine called Health. And also I published my first non-fiction work, which was called Women and Sex. And in Health magazine, in Women and Sex, and in the Health Education Association, the three of them were banned. The association with the Health magazine was closed, and I lost my job. The main reason is that, I was trying with some young doctors at the time to connect health with politics and to connect sexual oppression with political and economic oppression, and to speak about women, female circumcision, why women are circumcised, why also male circumcision, because as physicians, we were very much against cutting any part of the body, whether under any religion or under any culture. So we were fighting against male circumcision and against female circumcision. I was fighting against, the very, very limited conception of virginity. Because at that time, in Upper Egypt, when a girl was supposed to marry virgin, to marry not virgin, her parents could have, they kill her. The father killed the daughter, because on the wedding night there is no blood of virginity. So, and from my experience as a physician, I noticed that almost 30% of girls in my studies, 30% of girls were born with no hymen, they were non-virgins. And some of them were killed while they were innocent, with no premarital sex. So in fact, I was obliged as a physician to write about that, about sexual problems, about circumcision. Some girls bled to death from circumcision, and I had to treat them. Illegal abortion. I worked as a physician in the village, and I noticed that some women died because they tried to abort themselves under very bad conditions. So I wrote about that. So the Minister of Health, he didn't like that at all.
The man who was in power at the time you were fired, the man who later put you in prison, Anwar Sadat, is a man seen in this country by many people as a liberal, as a liberator, as a peacemaker, and yet your relationship with him was so very different.
Well, I noticed that because I traveled a lot in Asia, in Africa, and in Europe and in America, I noticed that rulers in the so-called third world, Africa, Asia, Latin America, rulers like Sadat or other, who really work for the West, not for their people, they are very loved here. And it's quite logic. People here, they love Sadat because he was working for the West, for the Americans, not for us. And this is quite, I can understand that. And in fact, the policy of Sadat, the economics, his policy in relation to economy, his political policy, his social, even his religious, it was Sadat who encouraged the religious fundamentalist movement in Egypt, both the Christians and the Muslims. When I was a student in Cairo University, in the medical college, during the 50s, there was not a single veiled student in Cairo University. Under Sadat, during the 70s, when my daughter was a student in Cairo University, almost 25 or 30% of the female students were veiled.
Why?
Because he encouraged the fundamentalist movement for two reasons, for two major reasons. Number one, to divide the country by religion, divide and rule. And religion is a very important element to divide people, and the British used that in Egypt. So Sadat, in fact, imitated the British. Number two, he wanted to neutralize the other political groups that were criticizing him, like the socialists, the communists, the liberal groups, who were standing against his so-called open door policy with the West. In that way, he encouraged the fundamentalists. So the fundamentalist movement, in fact, is, we call it state fundamentalism, because religious fundamentalism and the state or the government are two faces of the same coin. And this is happening in Egypt and Algeria and even here in the United States. So in a way, Sadat was looked upon as liberal, democratic. He started what he called multi-party system. And he said, now we have democracy, we encourage the opposition. I believed him. And I started criticizing him. I landed in jail.
That's why he sent you to prison?
Yes, he sent me out to prison just because I was writing, criticizing his policy.
How did that change you? Your life, your writing, your work?
Oh, tremendously. Because writing to me is like breathing, I flourish with writing. I develop with writing physically and mentally and politically and socially. Writing to me is something it's very physical. It's not just, writing to me is not an intellectual thing, it's physical. It's part of me. So I develop with it, I grow with it. I wrote since I was 12 years.
You developed new ideas of heroism too when you were in prison. I think you said it was in prison that you learned that heroes are people who don't bow their heads when they die.
Well, the word hero, in fact, I don't believe very much in heroes at all, especially individual heroism. No. That's why when I came out of jail, I felt that women should organize collectively. I believe more in collective work, and that you cannot change society by individual effort. You need collective work. But also I believe in the individual, the will of the individual. And heroism to me is to be yourself, just to be yourself. And it needs a lot of courage. It needs a lot of courage just to behave normally and to be natural and to speak your own mind and to be yourself. And that's creativity. In fact, creativity is very simple, to be yourself. But we are prevented from the date we are born till the date we die from being ourselves.
It's the hardest struggle, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Everywhere.
When you travel in this country, talk with people, another great gap between our two worlds seems to be Islam and the way Islam is understood, its history in your part of the world, how it's viewed here. You've said Muhammad was a great progressive, that Islam was potentially a very progressive faith for women.
Yeah.
And yet, I think 2 weeks ago, I was reading in the paper 2 young women in Algeria standing on a street corner waiting to go to school, bareheaded, and shot. What happened? What went wrong?
Well, but this is like the physician who was shot by the Christian fundamentalists in Florida because he was doing abortion. You know, there is Christian fundamentalism and fanatism here also who kill doctors because of abortion or the so-called pro-life movement. But, you know, we have to separate between religion as a faith, for me, religion is not an institution. Islam or Christianity. First of all, in the West here, a lot of people think that Islam is oppressive, is the only religion that oppresses women. I studied Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And as I told you, women are inferior in the 3 religions. And I made comparison between the 3 books in my book, The Hidden Face of Eve. So in a way, if 2 women were killed in Algeria, or some intellectuals were killed in Algeria or Egypt, or if I am threatened myself with this movement, and the government put security guards around my house 24 hours. We cannot say, well, this is Islam, because this will be wrong. This is a political movement. The fundamentalist movement is a political movement. It's a universal movement. There is Christian fundamentalism, who kill people. There is Jewish fundamentalism. There is Hindu fundamentalism. So it's a political movement, economic movement, universal movement. It's much more visible in our region because the separation between religion and state is much there. Here, the gap between religion and state is becoming narrower and narrower. But still, there is no secular government. I haven't seen secular government, really secular, that really separate between religion and state. Because religion in its original is a political ideology. If you read the Old Testament or the Bible or the Quran, it's politics. It's war, it is inheritance, it is marriage code, it speaks about sexuality, it speaks about everything. So the holy books are political books.
Goes back to the linkage you were talking about.
Yes, exactly.
One of the things that I thought of as I was reading your work and reading about you was the danger that some writers say is the worst danger that they can think of, and that is exile. And that when you leave your country, if you ever worry that there is the possibility that you will find out you can't go home.
Well, for me, I do not feel I am in exile, you know, though I left the country because of this threat. But I can go, of course, risking, but still I can go. And I want to have the feeling that I can go, and I will go. I will go because I feel like a fish outside the sea. And I have to go sooner or later. That's my country, my people. I write in Arabic. I cannot write in English. That's where I belong. That's where I struggle, you know. Though here in the United States we are starting the Arab Women's Solidarity branch in North America. So the struggle everywhere. But still, because of the Arabic language, I love the Arabic language. It's my language, and it's my mother tongue.
You talk about language as if it's edible. It's something. It's real.
It's real.
You can chew on it.
Exactly, and it's music, and you cannot translate music. When I read my novels in English, I become disappointed because at least 30 or 40% of the language, of course, is not there because you change from Arabic to English and the music is not there. So it's very frustrating to speak in English or to write in English. So I have to go to Egypt, but I don't feel I am in exile. I don't like this feeling. But of course, I am temporary. I can say I am in a temporary exile, not permanent one, hopefully.
We have very little time left, but I wanted to ask you what you think you will be able to see in your lifetime in terms of women's liberation in your world.
Well, it's a very difficult question because usually I don't know how long I'm going to live. But still, I think what's left in front of me is not so much. But I'm not looking in relation to my lifetime. I'm looking more beyond my life. I am very optimistic by nature. When I was in jail, everybody around me was saying, oh, we are going to die, Sadat will kill us, you know. And they were depressed and pessimistic. I was very optimistic, and I told them, no. I feel he will die before us. And it happened, and we came out. So I am very optimistic because I feel that when I read the history of humanity, I felt that we are progressing. We are progressing. History gives me a lot of confidence in the future because we know the future when we know the past. We have to know the past in order to see the future. So I felt that humanity did a lot of progress, a lot. So I think many things will happen.
Nawal El Saadawi, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Upon Reflection.
Thank you.
To see more UWTV classics, visit uwtv.org/classics.